Well, good evening, folks. It's getting near the end. It's week 7, and as usual, there's a lot of stuff to cover. And in week 7, we're going to spend most of the time looking at what the text calls internal stakeholders. And for most of us, that means the relationship between employer and employee. What's it all about? How has it changed over the years? How is it still changing? And what are some of the considerations in the workplace? We don't often think of these as ethical issues, but in many cases they are. So what I'm going to try to do very quickly tonight is just go through with you so much stuff that actually you're going to see me keep checking over to my computer here so I can make sure that I don't miss anything. But a lot of interesting concepts are going to come up. And, we face them all so commonly. We face them every day. We don't really see them as ethical issues. We just see them as workplace practices. But, the fact that I'm sitting here tonight in my dining room talking to you, this is one of the big changes. It's Sunday night. In my parents' generation, Sunday night, people weren't working. Tonight, what am I doing? I'm working. I'm working on the course. I'm talking to you. I'm expected to be doing this. I think my colleagues at the university expect me to be doing this. I expect it of them. And guess what? It's different than it was a generation ago. Technology has changed so much on us that when all the advent of personal computers and mobile devices and all this was just beginning back when I was kind of a management rookie back in the late 70s. All this was going to give us more free time. That's what all the technological experts and the futurists and the predictors of what all these great productivity improvements were going to do for us. They were going to give us more leisure and more time to be creative and more time to be relaxed. And what have I found that they've done? They've given us more time to work. So now we don't just work 40 hours a week. We can work whenever we want to. And what's happened? We're expected to work whenever we want to, and when other people want us to. So it's a very that's just in and of itself an indicator what the change has been. I'm going to keep glancing over here because I want to make sure I get to just about everything. There is so much stuff to cover this week that we're just going to have to stick with it, pay attention, just a lot, ask questions of yourselves and of your colleagues and the discussion board, me, as we go along, because there's just so much stuff. The whole idea is, though, just remember, we have really shifted to knowledge work. There's no such thing anymore as lifetime employment. Remember, and again, refer back to my parents' generation. Their people got a job and held it for their entire career. Now people not only switch jobs regularly, we switch careers. And nobody really thinks too much of it. It's kind of the common way to go. Has this affected our behavior towards each other in the workplace? I think it has. And as you go through the literature this week, I think you'll see many indications of that. Want to make sure you're aware of what the changing workforce is all about. A lot of issues are there. So we're going to look at things like the aging in the workforce, and is there such a thing as age discrimination? Definitely, sexual harassment is a very big factor. Cultural mix. There's so many different cultures now coming together in the workplace. We're not as singular a society as we once were. We're a very diverse society, and all these cultural mixes come together in the workplace. Educational gaps. Is there a gap in income that is increasing or decreasing, and what's it mean? Who's on the good end of that gap and who's on the short end? Those kind of things are there. So we're going to look at the generational issues and what does that mean. Questions going to be put into in front of you this week about this idea of employment at will. Most of us work under that doctrine. Most states have this employment at will doctrine. And what that basically means is you, as an employee, have a right to pretty much a right to quit when you want to, But, the employer has a right to fire you without giving a reason. And it's a sticky point for a lot of people, is that, again, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right. What is that all about? I think you're going to find that interesting as you go through the text. You have rights as an employee, rights that are based on a moral claim and rights that are based on legal claims. What does that mean to you? We've all heard the term just cause. Well, what is just cause? What's reasonable? What can you expect? What is due process? All these things come in. Are there privacy issues? How do you feel about the company you work for reading your email? Do they have a right to do that? How about listening to your phone calls? How about a background check before you get the job? Criminal check? Most of us understand. A credit check? Do we all buy into that? Do employers have a right to do this? Are these ethical issues? Questions I think we need to answer. Can we monitor employees? Can we monitor their activities? Drug testing. Things I'm looking at here. What responsibilities do you have? What legal rights do you have under such things as the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 and 1991? So there's a whole bunch of things. Affirmative action, another one. Been very controversial for a lot of people for a long time. A policy, a law, a measure created to right past wrongs, and some people feel that it created new ones, and that really it's not as fair as it ought to be. How do you feel about that? Is it an ethical issue? So there's a lot of things that we want you to look at. Whistleblowing. We've all heard of whistleblowing. Can we protect a whistleblower? Remember back in the Enron case, we had a whistleblower. Much of the behavior that we wrote about and looked at and said was really bad, outright evil, we might not have known that about if somebody hadn't blown the whistle. So all these things are out there. A management philosophy that I've talked about to many people for a long time is this idea that employers ought to treat their employees as internal customers. The idea, I don't know how many of you may have heard that before, but if we treat our employees like customers, then everything's going to be better. Well, there's only one problem with that. Many employers treat their employees as customers, as if the employer was a monopoly and that customer only had one place to go to get what they need. That's not what we mean by that concept. But is it a way that some employers act towards their employees? So all these workplace issues are what we're looking at this week. We're looking at turning the gaze inward into the organization to see how organizations behave towards their own members. Remember, organizations are collections of people, but as such, organizations exhibit some things that we were talking about in earlier weeks. They will exhibit cultural norms, they exhibit values, they exhibit the behaviors that their leaders exhibit. All these things come into play. So there's a lot of material this week. Please go through it carefully and then step back every once in a while and try to look at it as though you're really looking at what's happening in your daily life, because it will depend on how you look at it. But so much of this stuff we say, hey, wait a minute, that's something that happens every day where I work. We don't stop and think about the ethical import of it. But is it really there? Questions I think you have to answer, and it's questions that I think are appropriate for us to bring up at this time. Okay, so there's a lot of material, a lot of stuff this week. Remember, we're looking inside the organization at the internal stakeholder approach. If there's any questions, please get a hold of me, and I'm looking forward to working with you again this week. Thank you.